Carta Curry which tastes the show. I know a lot of you have to run on, so we'll get this started because there was the two ladies here already were getting off from one before the recording started, so I want to try and grab them here before we lose any more good info that they're going to give us. So, ar dús bara bhil an fáilte mhór chur roh bhfuil an seo ag glór na múna. Táiméid calorie seachtain na Gaeilge agus Lá Idirnáisiúnta na mBan agus táiméid Johnny aniu le Birch Aintach Birch Cion Rodiac Anne Spraggle ar fad Mary agus Sue Pentel. So I'd like to welcome you all here today to Glór na Múna. We're celebrating Seachtain na Gaeilge and International Women's Day, and no other better way to do it than with Mary Enright and Sue Pentel on the panel. So as well, Liz Maskey was to be with us today. Unfortunately, she can't be with us as she's attending Rita O'Hare's funeral in Dublin. And I'd like to take this opportunity to say that today's event and celebration for International Women's Day is dedicated to Rita O'Hare, who was an inspiration to us all as a Republican, community and feminist activist. Go my hug at Rita. So, ar dús Mary Enright. So, ruggy agus tugu Mary ar bhuathar an láiste ar mé firste, sular fáisí agus sular néadí sí ar chruch diarmada in near her fel firste. But while bunnyhe the Relatives Action Committee, Gearóidín ar an Cléis Ada, and Group of Radica, Feminine Women Against Imperialism, agus anad na man ar bhuathar na bháil. Is gríomhaí card cumann feminine agus socialach fad bunnyhe atá oberjanta eci le réimse grúpaí ealaí Unison PPR agus CAJ. Mary Enright was born and raised...
Springboard as well.
I'll have to get that in again. Mary Enright was born and raised in New Lodge Road in Belfast before marrying...
No, I wasn't born there.
Not born?
No, I was born...
Fergal wrote the bio.
It's called Finstramar.
Before marrying and settling Dermot Hill in West Belfast, Mary was a founding member of the Relatives Action Committees, which led the campaign against the H-Blocks, the radical Republican feminist group Women Against Imperialism, and she later helped establish the Falls Women's Centre in 1984. Mary is a long-standing trade union, feminist and social activist who has worked with a range of groups such as Unison, PPR, CAG and...
Springboard.
Thank you. And now we have Sue Pentel. Ruggy agus Togi Sue in London, Sular Rugshi agus Kaishi Hien a Sale Public Tanach and Sean Aaron. Fishi in a Boil the People's Democracy agus Boil Bunnyhe the Women Against Imperialism Comai. Is Greewee Hard Common Feminach agus Free Kinach Sue. Narker Fake Alun agus a Kini Slad agus Colinahis in Israel or in Palestine. Is Greewee Changa Mai agus Boil Bunnyhe the Gaelskull Nawal agus Anadiva. So Sue Pentel was born and raised in London, and pop in Sue with anything that isn't. before moving and throwing herself into the politics here in Ireland, she was a member of People's Democracy who also helped found Women Against Imperialism. Sue is a trade union, feminist and social activist who has been an outspoken critique of Israel occupation of Palestine. She is also an Irish language activist who helped found Gaelskull Nawal and Anadiva. So I'd like to open up with a generic question for the both of you, just with the day that we're celebrating International Women's Day, which will take place tomorrow. We're just expanding it out a wee bit and we're gonna celebrate it for a few days. So I'd just like to know what International Women's Day means to you both. Mary, if you'd like to go first.
Well, for a start, it's the fact that it was a women celebrating being a woman and being able to have their own agenda and what they felt was important to them, because we were quite backward here when it came to women. In some cases we still are, I think, but times have changed, people move on. But at that particular time it was always about, you know, the boys in the cash and the girls in Armagh, and we wanted to change that as well, the language, you know. So there were men that were in the cash, even though half of them were very young, and it was women in Armagh. So the language was important to change as well. The things clashed because there was the Relatives Action Committee, which was how I met Sue, because she was also involved in People's Democracy, and People's Democracy were quite radical. socialist. If you remember, anyone probably wouldn't remember, but Mike Farrell was there, and very impressive he was. That's why he left here and went to Dublin to live. He had his head screwed on. But very radical. And you didn't, I mean, I don't remember feeling to be radical. I just remember, because I did a thing with Dukas with Joe Austin, and I remember him saying to me, God, you were involved in a whole lot of things, weren't you? I said, I was. I mean, why was that? I says, I didn't think. You just did something. You know, something happened and you got involved, and something else happened and you got involved. And you didn't question, you just did what you thought had to be done. And things just happened, like the Relevance Action Committee. What happened was Jonah Rock came up to our house Easter Monday. I cut a sour far enough, and she came up because I even remember Jo. You know, she just took this into her head that this was happening to happen today, and she called up to see me. And I says, "It's Easter Monday." Well, you know what's going on in these prisons, and this has got. It hadn't even started the whole thing about the no wash and all that. We have to do something, which meaning I had to do something, because Joe was just going to do general, you know. Jesus. So we went to see people, Mark McCrory, we went to see Lily Fitzsimmons. Both of them are now deceased. Harriet Kelly, Harriet Carson. I just went around their houses. And I'm sure they're going to saw me far enough too. But that was the start of, I suppose, radicalism, insofar as that you weren't waiting for anyone to tell you what to do. You were deciding that something had to be done and it needed to be done now. And that was how I got sort of involved with the Relevance Action Committees. And then later on, we felt that with women you needed to sit down and discuss things, because there was the Women's Collective.
Belfast Women's
Collective.
Yeah.
But we had some difficulties, some differences with them. But overall, we worked together on certain things. The Northern Winchester thing, do you remember it?
Yeah.
And you were coming to me. You probably wouldn't have heard, but Northern Winchester
Yes.
was a young woman from the Shankill who was charged with murdering her father because there was incest in the family, and he was going to start on the next daughter. So she killed her father, and they were giving her life. So we were in the Relevance Act Committee at the time. Stuff was happening in the blocks, and we were having a protest in the town. Women's Collective were having a big protest. I went over to Queen's. They had meetings there, because it's very out of West Belfast, you know. So I went over anyway. And my poor son suffered for it because I had a crash. Arnell, Jesus, he cried for a day. He cried. God forgive me. Poor child. Anyway, it was two young lads making kids, probably never made kids before, sitting in a wee terrace house somewhere, and we're sitting in the big frigging place over at Queen's. Oh, shit. But anyway, we're talking about Northern Winchester, and we're going to have this protest. And I said, well, we already were having a protest because we were going to block the road to Blackman, because it's the best place to block. You want to block Belfast, that was the best place to go. And on the day that we had the big demonstration in the town, it was at the City Hall, and it really annoyed me because we all went to the City Hall. I don't know if you remember, Sue, but we all went to the City Hall, and all the banners were there from the women's groups all over. And on the way back, we blocked the road, and we sat down, and a lot of the women in the women's groups with their banners just walked on. Didn't participate. And I was really annoyed because they were making a difference, you know. But that's men, you know, like this is crap. This affects women. I mean, who lives with men? Women live with men. You know, women have children, their husbands, their sons, their brothers. They were interned, you know, internment. My brother was interned, my other brother was sentenced, so, you know, and before us it was political something, I can't remember the name of it now. Political hostages, I think. Do you remember the banner, the posters they had, or
Yeah. Yeah.
You remember that were white with black wire on it? You know, so there was always somebody doing something. But I think we just got a wee bit better at it and got more people involved. Do you remember that day?
I do.
Did it annoy you as much as it annoyed me, Sue?
It did.
Do you know,
It did.
do you know that ending on that with the annoyance and kind of pinpointing things brings me to the next question. So if you want to come in on this, was there something specific that politicised you and drew you towards the activism? Just on going
Well,
on.
just solidarity yn bywel am mywehys y gold y glôn y mowna, agus is oce jaintach eisio gafdinia ecol, sgafda ecol, agus more yn privilege agus honna do a fair and arden Lá Mary, agus Liz. So I just want to say thanks to Glón y Mowna for the invite. It's a great occasion to see everybody. And it's a great honour and privilege for me to be next to Mary. And I'm going to be nice just because we're being cameraed. But Mary was one of the first people I met as a sort of socialist and activist, along with Terry and, you know, Eileen and all the rest of it. And then we got drawn into stuff. I came over here as a socialist already. I was radicalised as a, I suppose, well, I first read Karl Marx, this is a cliche by the way, in Golders Green Library. So if you know anything about the Jewish sort of ghetto in London at 15, and I went, yeah, philosophers have interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. And I went, right, that's for me. And I'm not kidding. I didn't do an awful lot. But the one thing I am going to say is when I was in England, I got involved in the Fourth International at college. That's where I met John McEwan, my long-suffering better half, who didn't know if men could come. So like the good socialist he is, he said, I'll stay in, you know, take it easy. And then in Manchester with my friend there, I felt there was always a big gap between ordinary people and people who are involved in politics, as good and as, if you like, intelligent, well-read, and all the rest of it. And I was into that, and I'm still into that, absolutely. Education, as Mandela said, is the road ahead. It wasn't until I came here, maybe in your kitchen, Mary, that I felt really part of a movement. And I think it was probably in terms of International Women's Day, the strength of women. Okay, now obviously we've two communities that are very similar, I suppose, sort of Jewish community and nationalist community. Okay, you know, women have a strong role, and that's not to be forgotten. But the women that I met here, I mean, their strength, their voice, and their determination. I just learned so much from them. And I remember Maura McCrory, I'll be honest with you, when Maura stood up at the corner and started speaking, I was scared. But they were brilliant, Mary, Eileen, Lily, and so on. So we were sort of hanging around together, marching up and down the road. We were talking a lot. I also got involved in the women's movement. In fact, I contacted them when I came here, and great women. But as Mary said, they were there. And the experience, because I've always lived around Norfolk, well, you know, eventually that's where we wanted. We wanted to be in the community, near John's mummy, and we didn't want to go elsewhere, if you see what I mean. First of all, I felt accepted, you know, so I'm English, I'm Jewish, I'm a socialist, you know, that's not an easy fit. And most of the time when I come over here, see sitting in a black hack, I just kept, you know what the word stum means? I just kept quiet.
You could have been black as well.
Yeah, you know. No, what I mean, Mary just said to me, they're fucking English, you know, and I know she's not. There you go. So I am that Sassenach, but I felt that it was an even playing field for us. We were all together trying to do something, and we learned. There was a woman called Liz who's still here, Liz LeGroux, should be here.
She should be.
Una, all of those. We were all trying to do something. And I mean, the crack was 90. Do you remember the Green Hot? I mean, why these guys let us in? I used to say to Liz, two English women, and we were just welcomed. And we had these nights on the Green Hot. And do you remember Mrs. Gray? Oh my.
Or brilliant.
And we'd go, right, we'll do a wee leaflet. What are we doing? But it was already happening. We were just there to support you.
Yeah.
But I do remember that day. And I do remember going to meetings and talking to people about what I would have put it, the anti-imperialist struggle, because that was PD. I'm following the line now of PD, that the anti-imperialist struggle and the importance of that and the sort of society we were trying to build, and how you struggle for your freedom has a lot to do with what sort of society you're going to build. So without women, you're not building an equal society. And trying to persuade these guys to come over, and I think I got you over to a couple of meetings.
You did.
I think John probably gave us a lift. Poor suffering John, and they turned around after me and said, "We're not going back there. Those women have nothing in common with us." So we tried to get a dialogue, and they are good women. I still see them. I saw some of them. I was down there on Saturday at the International Women's Day March with a Palestine banner, and I saw loads of women that I know and that I've known for years. And you've got to respect them.
Oh, yeah.
Women from the LGBT community were there from the beginning, and who were anti-imperialist.
Yes, yes.
But there was no place
No.
for us as women, as you said, Mary. And I don't think it was backward. As Connolly said, once this island was partitioned, there was a carnival of reaction. It took me a long while to get used to that. Because in London, where I was, there was sort of so many different influences. You could just be yourself. Whereas here, the lines were drawn much harder. Yeah. And we did some crazy things, like we picketed the Roddy Macaulay's, was it? Was it that? Was it? We picketed a club.
We did.
Because women weren't allowed in on a Sunday.
We did the Marty Forsyth.
Oh, the Marty Forsyth.
And we did the New Barnsley one too. We did New Barnsley Club. And the women were going to beat us up for doing it.
I just quickly humiliation. But the main thing was, and I was reading a bit about it, and I found some old magazines. If the women were carrying the family, people were interned, people were imprisoned, and then women themselves were being imprisoned, and that was the thing. Whatever you thought of the way the struggle was being conducted. And there was a fierce argument. I mean, this is a very democratic community about the armed struggle. So PD was sitting outside of that argument in solidarity, having a different view, and that was fine. We were still marching up and down the road and all the rest of it. But we sort of, after a few, as you said, things in the centre of town, we thought we need to do something for ourselves, and that's what we all came together.
Yeah.
I think it was Mary who said, "Well, come on, we'll do this." And then we used to do a paper in Mary's front room. Yeah. And Eileen was there, and we'd cut it up and stick it on. Save Anne, we called it. Do you remember?
Yeah.
I haven't got any copies. I give them to the Falls Women's Centre. And around that time, all of the community groups were starting. But the thing I wanted to say was this: the narrative was H Block and the poor women in Armagh, and we turned that right round.
And it was important, but the language
H Block Armagh, as well as highlighting what was happening, the strip searches, the lack of sanitary protection, the violence, the important role of women, and also what yous were going through with fathers and sons and brothers in prison, and not only organising the family, going to visit and doing that, but actually organising resistance. Like, who stopped the Brits coming into Ballymurphy? It was the women. The bin lids was the women. Yeah. So, I mean, I just thought, how lucky can you be to be in the right place at the right time? So I had a ball. That's it, Sinead.
My who. I just want you to touch a wee bit more and elaborate a wee bit more on the women against imperialism. You've touched a wee bit on it there. I'd like you to maybe, I'm enjoying the way it's going between you there in the conversation, so that this question will work really well for you. Can you tell us a wee bit about the background of its formation, a wee bit more, give us a bit more information and what the aims were?
Well, basically it was to raise issues that were specific to women. And we did want to raise the whole thing about, the fact that women were left at home to not only be active on the street, but to care for their families. They were going parcels up to the cash and all that sort of stuff. Green Cross, like myself and a lot of other women did Green Cross collections. That was all part of the overall struggle. I can't actually remember how we got together, but we did somehow. Can you? Because I can't.
I think we had this discussion that it was all very well going to being involved in the women's movement, and I would still support the women's movement, but it wasn't represent local people. And as Mary said, the only time that if you like, the two sides came together. And that's still true in community work.
Yeah.
There's still a very strong cross community. You know, it's for the bosses to divide us. We don't need to be divided, you know. But anyway, that's a different discussion. That we needed to be organised ourselves. So I think we were doing a number of things. We were going to sort of big conferences and raising the anti-imperialist struggle and saying, we need support for H Block Armagh. You can't just avoid it because it's not easy. And you know, in Dublin, there wasn't a lot of sympathy for what was going on up here. There was none. Which is exactly. So I'd say I did a bit of that. You did a bit of that. Some of us went down, but the most important thing was us here.
Yes, but the Payment for Debt Act, we got involved in that.
Payment for Debt Act,
because that was internment. You see.
Yeah.
They said we'll not pay our rent or our rates. But there was no organisation about what we were going to do whenever we had to start paying them again. So everybody got the debt in danger. And then I think it was the SDLP came into power, and as soon as they get in, well, not into power, give them a wee bit at the side of the table. And they said, tell them, you know, you have to start paying that back. So we're introduced the Payment for Debt Act. So they could take it out of if you were unemployed, take it when you got it. You didn't get it, they took it out before you even got it.
They took it out of your benefits.
So you were short on your benefits because you only get the minimum. And then if they're taking money out because you haven't paid your rent, you haven't paid your rates, then you're skint. You know, so this was really wrong. So we had a campaign in Women Against Imperialism about that. We wrote into the women in Armagh. We wanted to have a picket outside Armagh because of International Women's Day, making it more visual.
That was the thing, yeah.
And because I remember the bus driver, he said, we got there in the bus anyway. I don't even know how to get the money for the bus, but we got it. And he said, there's nobody about here. And all right, he says to him, did we ask you for advice or something? And he said, no. He says, you're paid to sit here. She just sat here. We'll take the rest from here if you don't mind. There was no back doors, you know what I mean? It was like, so, and when we had the protest at Armagh, it was good because the prisoners could actually hear you because it was the old prison. And they had a banner out the side, and we were actually at the side of the prison. And we were all shouting up, you know, like, Jennifer McCann, we support you, whoever, we support you, and they were shouting back down. The protest was over. The bloody thing was over, we were leaving.
And how many did we have, Mary? About 30 of us?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a good one, it was a good one.
There was, but I mean, that was the one that started it all going with the feminists across the water and all. That was great, the women from England came over in their droves. Troops out movement. I'm with you all the way.
Mary, just in you saying that about the feminist groups, did you find that there were other feminist groups, did you find that they were sympathetic towards the republicanism?
Well, most of the women who came over from across the water would have been troops out anyway, so they were sympathetic.
Yeah.
You know, but we weren't pushing the whole armed struggle thing or anything. Yeah. We were just saying, this is a human rights issue as well. This is an equality issue.
Exactly.
You can't treat people differently.
Yeah.
You know, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
So it wasn't a Republican group as such.
Yeah.
We were saying, look, as you said, it's human rights.
Yeah.
People have the right, you know, to stand up. And as women, we want to be seen standing up. I mean, we put it as many ways. And I mean, I was involved in PD, and I remember going to a big conference in Dublin. And there were motions put, and there were fierce debates, but I mean, they didn't win. I remember, you know, because they were sitting on the fence there. And I mean, this place didn't get divorce legislation, equal pay legislation. All of that came in late because of the influence of the churches, exactly the same in the South. And look at the Constitution and the position of women. So it was the same dynamic, but it was, in a sense, it was a class thing there. It wasn't local women. Now, I'm not saying there weren't local women involved, but it was, you know, that wasn't something they wanted to get into.
Because we all went down for the conference, some big place, fancy place, and I thought, I'm going to kill myself.
I remember that, yeah.
There were ballet dancers and all. You said, what the fuck's going on? What's this got to do with women? And here's me to Liz, I don't believe this. Liz says, I know. Me and you's getting up to sing. Here's me, well, aye. So we went down the back. You're not getting on. Here's me, who's not getting on? We want to sing, we're going to sing. And we get up and sing in the Galway shawl. It was the only thing we could think of women in it. And they couldn't wait to get us off. Now that's how radical they weren't.
There was.
I mean, a madness.
But
But they still questioned it.
should we just say the last thing? We were just reminiscing that we organised this conference. So we gathered, now it was a real team effort.
Oh, it was.
Testimonials from all the women inside detailing everything that was happening.
That's right.
How they were treated, how they felt about the strip searches, what
Must be somewhere.
facilities they had.
That stuff must be somewhere.
That's frustrating, but we really should get it together. And we organised this tribunal. So it was the Armagh Women's Tribunal, and it was the old Lake Glen Hotel, which is now a bingo. So, and we invited Vanessa Redgrave. So that's what we were laughing about. So Vanessa Redgrave, the big film star, was actually in a socialist group in England. They were a bit crazy. They weren't on my wing, if you like. And she donated all her money, and she's still radical now. She donated all her money to, this guy turned out to be a bit of a crazy, but that doesn't characterise socialists in general, but he was a bit crazy. But anyway, so she asked for her fares, and I got dogs abuse, because I went, we're paying it because we need the name, but it was good,
Yes,
wasn't it?
it was. But there's young women.
I don't know who paid it even, I can't remember who.
She used to pay to get Birmingham to say she was.
She said that, well, anyway, we paid, it was just her fare, like, it didn't give her
only
a
her
big
fare.
fee. It's only a fare.
But whatever she earned anyway, she did give it into.
Oh, 100%,
You know what
I
I
don't
mean?
think there was any.
But there was a couple of the troops out from Scotland or some wee girl got up and started, young woman, sorry, got up and said, what? The pen hurts me, oh Jesus Christ.
But the tribunal was a big success,
Brilliant.
wasn't it?
It was
It
brilliant.
was packed and we
And
had...
it was the women's own words. You know,
We just read
from the
out,
prisons.
everybody read out. In fact, we got all these, Vanessa Redgrave and who else was it? There was, we were trying to remember.
Can't remember.
Do you know if we get a link to it, you can post it up because it's quite a story. There are a number of them. Margaret Darcy was one of them.
Yeah.
And someone from the troop settlement, they all read out the women's words. And
So it was powerful. It was powerful. At the
from
time.
then on, it was H Block Armagh. It was no longer H Block. Do you know what I mean? And that was what we were trying to do, to show them that women were important in the struggle. So I think that's what drove us, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To get a voice.
Well, we certainly know you're going to give us a voice. We had to take it. And you'll find it the same today.
Mary, I'd like to know also, how did the Falls Women's Centre come about?
Well, it came about basically because there were some of us had dual, what do you call it, dual what? Not partnerships, dual membership of Sinn Féin and women's groups. And the Sinn Féin had the premises, and they were getting new ones, well not new ones, better ones, at the corner where they are now. But the one they had was, it's flats now in the Falls Road. But that was the Sinn Féin Centre.
Mulholland Terrace, I think.
No, that's the one further on up. The one just facing Clonard Street. Yeah. Those houses there. Yes, it was there. So that was. Yes. Well, the Sinn Féin had an office there, so they gave it to us, and said you can have it. And they said we should go for a women's centre, because there were certain things happening in the area. For example, one of the clubs in the road, I don't want to say that it's the wrong one, but I think it was the Hibs, said women weren't allowed in unaccompanied. You may laugh. They weren't allowed unaccompanied by a man after a certain time at night. And we went down and said, this is ridiculous. Look at the many men in jail and they haven't got their partners to go out with. And women should be allowed blah, blah, blah. So you did those wee stupid fights, but they were still important. You know, things you just take for granted now that you couldn't then. So you were constantly fighting about things. There was a rape case somewhere at that time as well, and we thought we would have something, a march against rape. And we had, I think Mairead Farrell spoke at that. She got out that time and she said she would speak at it. But it was a great, it was, I mean, I enjoyed it because the women were really strong and supported each other, and it was really good. I mean, and it started off, people thought, because we were very specific. I mean, Liz said, look, okay, Sinn Féin has given it us because we're in Sinn Féin, but it's not for Sinn Féin, it's for women. Any woman who needs help can come here. And we got funding, because Liz worked for the Falls Council at the time, with Callum Bradley, who was always very good, very radical, very fair man. And she said we could put in for funding through, I think it was Making Belfast Work or BRO, whatever they call themselves.
It was one of those, yeah.
For funding, so we could get an administrator, a child care. There was 3, or something else, whatever.
Advice, I
think. There was 3. She applied for it and we got funding for 3 people. And we got 3 women in the jobs. Sadie, who was one of the first women I was a gag, she was great. Mad as a hatter. But great with kids and all. And Greta, Dougherty, and the other girl, Maura from St James's, whose name I can't remember. Anyway, it's so long ago now, but it was a very worthwhile experience. And just for the record, a man came down one day, because it was a long hall and you had to go upstairs. There was no rooms down here, they were all upstairs. And this man came and he shouts up the stairs, and I was coming down and I said, what is it? He says, is this the women's centre? I says, aye. Now I say to a man in his maybe late 50s, early 60s. He says, aye. He says, can I come down about my daughter? I says, I don't think so. But he says, her husband's beating her. I says, I know, but you can't come. No good you coming. You tell her if she wants to come down, she has to come. There's no point in you complaining. She has to come on her own. And, oh, right. And you're not allowed up the stairs anyway. You have to stay in the car. And you know, I found out later on when we met his daughter and his wife, that he beat his wife. Now, I couldn't believe it. Here's me. I was him come down and he beat you. She's all my life. So it's, you know, it's those things that are hard to take as a woman. You know, so the centre did provide really good work, and they accompanied women to go to the dole office. They accompanied them to go to the courts, to see solicitors, if you needed help. And half the times you used to say, I felt like saying, why don't you just hit him over the head with a friggin' saucepan or something? You know, you've been too nice, but you can't say these things.
No, I'll cut that bit out. Thank you, Mary. So I'd like to ask you, would you give us a wee bit of a background on how Gael's Skull Noel came about, and what your contribution to that was?
Okay, so sort of the same time, 80s. Kids were being born. I remember Mary turned around to me one day and said, what happens to people like you? Do you go back? And I went, well, I'm probably not going back. Remember? Next thing you know, you have 3 kids. Put them down for the bun skull. We didn't... John also is a non-believer, and he didn't want to go back in. He didn't want the kids to go to a similar school to him where, you know, essentially they were beat and humiliated. I'm not saying it was terrible, because obviously he did okay.
Just the same here. It was the same here for all the schools.
Yeah, no, there was John. I'm talking about John McGowan.
Yeah.
So we looked at integrated education and we thought, well, what's that like? So it seemed to be quite out of the community, and we thought, right, so sort of Protestants on the left and Catholics on the right. Where do the atheist Jews go? Well, no, we're not going there because there's no place for us. It's not like it was, and it was out of the community. We didn't want to take the kids out. We wanted to be where we are. So anyway, so we were sort of very involved in music, and found out about the language, fell in love with that. First Irish class I went to was with Fergus O'Hare, the great Fergus, and I think I was pregnant. I thought, gee, I better learn this now if I'm going to have kids. Put the kid's name down for Bonscol, no room, and people came and said, look, we need to start a new school. So we just, the two of us were involved with a bunch of other local people who, as I say again, we just got on. There was no feeling like, you didn't belong in that. We were doing something. It was great. So it was like Lower Falls, and I always said that Girls Gone Wild was the community wing. Those parents, like, we weren't teachers, but well, John was a social worker, but we weren't professionals and we weren't Gael goers. We were just people who wanted Irish for our kids. And a whole bunch of us, I'm just probably the face because I went on to stay in Irish medium and I do talk. But yeah, it was great, and we just started in 87 and didn't get funding till 92. So I got to know a whole load of people because you had to knock doors, collect money, but we organised in the most professional way we could because our kids weren't going to lose out because we'd no money or because the Irish language was a dirty word. And then we got involved with Honor de Voc, which was a family centre, learnt so much from you community guys. Everybody was organising and setting up community facilities, and as far as we were concerned, you gave the best service you could give because the Irish language community deserved that. And you opened the door and you said to people, come in, doesn't matter if you have Irish or not, if this is what you want for your kids or for yourself, you're welcome. Yeah. And all communities were welcome, asylum seekers and refugees. I mean, the reputation of Falls Women's Centre is amazing. The work that they do for women is amazing, and we learnt from that. All of the community groups were being... So I sort of saw it as a community thing, but it took off as a school, so yeah.
So if you don't mind staying with you on that, I just, you touched a bit about Palestine earlier on, and I'd like to know why has the issue of Palestine been so close to your heart? If you would... Maybe for people that don't know much, or maybe just want to know a bit more.
You may stop me then, because I could go on forever.
We'll kind of wrap it up after this one, unless you just want to say anything else.
No, Mary should have the last word, guys. Very, very briefly, as a socialist, you're always aware of injustice in the world, and the first one I suppose I clicked with me was Vietnam. And that was one of the things that radicalised me, American troops in Vietnam, local people being denied, their rights, their land. But I suppose as a socialist, there were a lot of people like me from a similar background, I think, although I came from an Orthodox background, but our family wasn't that well off, so we couldn't follow all the laws. My father had to work on Sabbath. If you're Jewish, you don't travel, but he had to. So that was pretty good. I liked him for that because we just did our own thing. Anyway, you weren't radicalised around Palestine, I guess, until things started. I would say until around 2000. So I was a socialist for many years. I'd always been anti-Zionist. So I don't agree that Jews have a right to a homeland. I don't agree with that. I think it's a, if you like, a narrative that was devised in Western Europe by people who felt that it was okay to go to another country because they considered other countries and use the land to build a place for them. Now, I am not in any way minimising the impact of the Holocaust and what happened. 100% no. And my grandparents on both sides fled anti-Semitism and pogroms. Eastern Europe on one side and somewhere in Spain. I'm trying to find out so I can visit it. On the other side, that was in the church, that was in the 1500s, and the others were in the 19th century. And the Holocaust was a massive shadow over my sort of consciousness, but what I took from it was you had to stand up and fight for people's rights. And the more I learned about Palestine, I remember we used to go, like a Sunday school thing. So we had an equivalent as a Jew, and I remember sitting there and the teacher, so you're learning Hebrew, and I'm into languages and all that. I thought this was great. And there's a lot of debate in the sort of traditional sort of Jewish dialogue, there's a lot of debate and discussion, and I thought that you were really getting into the nitty gritty. I liked that until I realised what I was being taught. He put up a map of Palestine, Israel, and started talking about nuclear weapons, and I thought, right, okay. I had doubts, that was it for me, and essentially I became involved, I suppose, as a socialist, and then my good friend, who's no longer with us, Kathleen Niconnell, recruited me into the Irish-Palestine Solidarity Campaign. I kept walking past her on pickets going, I need to do this. And as a Jewish person, I didn't want to do it so that I felt better. It's not about me, but I do feel better. And now all I'm going to say to finish is this is the worst, darkest period that we've had. We have a right-wing government who I am not afraid to call fascist, because they're literally calling for Arabs to be killed. And you know the incident in Huwara and the villages in Hebron, where the settlers went rampaging, 300 settlers, and they killed a Palestinian and burnt and looted. That's what my grandparents faced. That's a pogrom.
Yeah.
That's a pogrom. And a government minister, Bezalel Smotrich, said, I'd like to see Huwara burnt to the ground, right? So it's more, all I'm going to finish in a way and say, I mean, I can talk about this again in other platforms, why it's important. Jewish people are more organised now. I'm in a group called, as well as the Irish-Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Jews for Palestine Ireland. And there's about 16 of us now, most of them in Dublin, Jesus. But we're part of the anti-apartheid movement, which at the moment is headed up by Francis Black. We demonstrate, we've been in the town, I think, 6 times since the beginning of the year. The death toll is rising. There's 67 Palestinians dead, 13 children. I know there's been violence against Israelis, and none of that is good, but the root cause is the oppression of Palestinians by the Zionist state, and the Zionist narrative is that it's their land, it's not their land. I've no right to go there. I would refuse to go there. I've never been on a solidarity thing. I've always refused to go as a Jewish person. I don't have a right. My friend Mohammed, he has the right. So there's so many issues in that. All I'm going to say to you is 26th of March, City Hall, we have a rally. Be with us.
I did say we'd finish up, but there was just one last question I would like to ask Mary, just with the Gluaiseach, the movement of young women coming through. Just I think the voices are like even in the Irish community and the wider circle, and some of them are your granddaughters are just finding their voice and their platform. What would your advice be to young female activists?
I would just say just go with what's in your head and your heart, because you know, you have to be true to yourself initially. And I mean, I've often said to people, don't be listening to people's opinion about other people. You know, they could say, do you know Bridget Loughlin? I know her. Do you know where she comes from? And her ma done this and her dad done that. You can't do that. You have to find your own way in your own world, and you have to accept the people that you are working with, and who do you need to show solidarity with. Whatever way you can do it, certainly do it. The Irish language has been a really good educationalist for a lot of, because you learn at a very early age, you know, that you have to fight for everything. And like Sue was saying about the school, so we weren't just we weren't just the Relatives Action Committee. You were collecting for the school. You were selling what you call Christmas cards. You were selling anything. You were having to sell cards to go over the casement for the fireworks display. So you were involved in everything. You know, it was a community thing.
Yeah.
So the women were involved in everything. And I think that has to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
And it should be acknowledged every day.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mary. Thanks very much.